Hello, friends. Just a content warning off the top. The Dispossessed does have a scene of sexual violence. We will give you a heads up before we discuss it, but if that's not what you're feeling today, we've got lots of other titles. Hop off and find another book, and I'm sending you lots of love. Take care.
I'm Tommy Guy.
I'm Rick Buig.
I'm Sarah Stockdale.
And I'm Andrew Corway, and this is Pagenerd.
Pregnant pause.
Yeah.
There we go.
Jay will get rid of those.
Pagenerd, a podcast about science fiction books. Today we're going to be continuing The Dispossessed by Ursula K. Leguin. This is a part 2, so if you haven't listened to part 1, you're going to have to listen to that, because otherwise this podcast is not going to make any fucking sense whatsoever. So you're going to want to go back.
Get crazy with it if you want to, okay? Listen to part 2, go back and do part 1 after. Do part 1 in 3 months.
This is an incredibly dense book. If you want to just hop in the middle, I don't know why you would, but welcome.
Get crazy.
I mean, I felt like I was dropped in the middle last time. There's a lot of proper nouns, and they don't make any sense.
That's absolutely true.
If you want that to be worse, keep listening.
Also, now I've read the book. The first.
We're a professional operation here.
Fucking winging it.
Hey,
I can't believe you winged The Dispossessed, Sarah.
I didn't
bold.
wing it. I was very clear I had the stomach flu, but I have now finished reading the book, and I have many more thoughts.
And she's keeping down whole food.
Hey, don't jinx me.
This leads credence to my theory that like this podcast is for like people who really like books and talking about books, but also just like book club cheaters. So if you haven't really, just dive in, listen to the book. Oh, that's what happens. Okay. Listen to us on 1.7 speed,
1.7 is too fast, Andrew. We've discussed this. That's insane.
What do you think we all sound like at 1.7? Do we sound like chipmunks?
Like Alvin and the Chipmunks.
Yeah. Rick's still going to just like booming voice
He's
still.
the bass.
Yeah. Like the podcast players slow back down.
Just for my audio?
Like, no. You're going to want to hear this part correctly.
I don't know.
Okay. Where were we?
So we're in the middle of this book. Before I get into it, I just want to spend some time on Ursula K. Le Guin. So over the last week since our last recording, I've actually been reading The Language of the Night, which is a book that Sarah and my friend recommended. It's all about her essays about writing and stuff like that. One of the things that I think stood out to me while I was reading this book about her origins as a writer is she didn't initially want to write science fiction. She didn't really think about it. All of the books were about military and hardware, but she felt like there was this untapped market of being able to take science fiction and explore social structures and explore how science can affect like the structure of how we set up societies and the pressures of that. And you can see that kind of thinking. And The Dispossessed to me is like the magnum opus years later to that thinking. And then in The Language of the Night, she also mentions that how hard it is as an artist to write art, because if you're only driven by the profit motive, it really blocks authors from potentially pursuing the great works within themselves.
I love that intro, Andrew. It makes me think Ursula Le Guin is like the prototypical page nerd author. If there's anything that we are, it's not let's talk about wormholes. It's technology has happened. What has happened to humans? And you're absolutely right. Like her using science fiction to explore who are humans when you scratch them a little bit. Who are humans when you give them new potentials? What do they turn into? Like that's what we want to do, man. That's our vein.
I think we're both, though. I definitely enjoy touching on the actual hard science of it.
Hey, man, love a good wormhole.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's interesting to discuss the science behind that piece and then see how that would reflect on a future culture, right?
And I think like The Dispossessed, now having, actually read it.
How did you do in school, Sarah?
We're not giving you a hard time. You're giving you a hard time.
I'm a lit major. Have you read any books?
Okay, you and Tommy.
Tommy, I read everything.
Okay. Later.
But I'm going to call her Ursula K. fucking Le Guin because she deserves that. She deserves the Mary Shelley treatment on Pagenerd because I find it really hard sometimes to imagine worlds that aren't capitalism.
Yeah.
Like to imagine worlds that don't have a social structure that we've tried before in human history. And she does this wonderful job of giving us a lens into what something else could look like and what the problems of that might be. Like not just utopias, but real, very like textured human societies that feel like exactly what would happen if you tried to, have an anarchistic society and then compare that up against like a highly capitalistic society. I love when authors can do that. They give you a new lens with which to look at the possibilities of your world. And she's such a fucking legend.
She's the best.
She's so good.
It's fascinating that she's doing that. Like, let's have non-capitalist world while being very stressed that the capitalist world will have no interest in publishing her work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe she's got a bone to pick.
Yeah, a very legitimate bone.
She was in an interview and she was asked, which awards are you hoping to get more, or do you enjoy more? The Hugo, the Nebula, blah, blah, blah. And she said the Nobel would be nice.
Fuck yes.
That would be nice.
What a badass.
Boss. What a fucking legend.
It really speaks to her because she felt like science fiction and fantasy is often seen as kind of these pulp stories. And here she was just elevating it.
She's doing literary fiction. She just happens to be writing in a world that is not this world. I love that.
Let's get into the story. So we're going to start off with Shevek. We're going to go back to Shevek's world. He's the main character who's gone off from Anarchist, which is an anarchist society on the moon of Uros. Anarez and Uros. Uros is the planet. Anarez is the moon.
Anarez is the anarchist one.
Yep.
Uraz is the capitalist one.
Yeah.
You got it, Tommy.
Okay.
That's right. So it's more complicated than that, but all you have to know is Anarez, the moon, is the anarchist one. Uraz, he's in the capitalist society of IAO, but there's also like a communist society called Thu, and there's like a Ben Billy, which is like an uprising state. So there's different governments on this planet, but he mainly is in the capitalist society of IAO because that's where most of the free publication is. And that's something that I think was very intentional by Ursula, which was IAO has no standards with what they will publish. That's very key in the plot. He had to leave Anarez and go to Uras because press is so guarded. Anarez has this Odoniism, which is like this kind of cult leader that led them to rebel and go to the moon. And they're kind of this mining colony for us. However, communication is very limited with the outside world. And one of the plot points in this book is Shevek had to leave. And when he got to Uras and he was able to do his research, he was given a basic, whatever this universe's equivalency of is like the Einstein's theory of relativity. So he didn't have that. He was coming up with some of the exact concepts on his own on the moon, but it wasn't until he left Anarez and went to Uras and had some of the freedom of publication that he was able to fill in the gaps in his knowledge and complete his theory of simultaneity. That's one of the things. So Ursula Guin's like exploring the idea of like communication being key. And you'll see this in all of her works. It's like the freedom of the individual mind and what these social structures do to your individual mind. So like I feel like maybe the word individual is right here, but it's also a little misleading because you're not really an individual, right? You're only an individual in the structures that you're placed in.
He also importantly had the time to work on his theory in the capitalist environment because there would be a commercial outcome from it, right? Like because it would give them leverage and power over the other people if he come up with a successful one. Whereas while he was in the on Anaris, there was no motivation for him to keep working on it. Like he got waylaid all the time to work on other labor-intensive tasks and stuff like that because it contributed more to the society right now instead of, like you said, egoism and him being involved in his own thoughts and sitting there and trying to make some sort of success for himself.
When was this written? Was it during Chairman Mao's reign in China where academics were sort of in a similar situation where like, oh, you're not actually contributing, like go tend the fields or die?
Early
1974.
Early
Yeah.
1970s.
1974. So it might be a bit of that, like there were societies, where like, I mean, okay, there's like sort of the Western society, if you will, where winning the Cold War or making money. Back then it was more winning the Cold War, now it's all making money. It's what's like driving scientific progress. Other societies that she may have been comparing to, and so she wrote in 74, Mao died in 76. So his sort of, big famines he's causing and stuff. This was, I believe, like the 50s and 60s. And academics, people that were pushing progress, the feeling was you're more useful in the field.
That's exactly what happens to Shevek. Like there is a famine and he has to go just work in the dust and labor.
I'm interested in exploring that when we get to there because I have like a theory about the ending about his mom. I wonder if you guys picked up on it too.
Ooh, there's mom shit in this book for
shit, there's mommy issues.
sure.
That's right. Okay, so let's
Oh.
get into the plot. Let's move it along. So let's go to the party. Shevek gets out. He meets up with Vea, and they have a kind of date. She invites him back to her apartment, and she's having this party. So there's people from all over, and he starts to drink for the first time. He bought her chocolates. He's drinking. He had 2 hefty meals during that day, which is unusual for him. So he's starting to really get into the Uras culture. Was this party an orgy? I couldn't tell. I think
No,
it
but
wasn't,
there are
right?
people making out in a corner that he's like horrified by the fact that they're like, it's like, it was interesting the way that he talked about it because he was like, it's so egoism because not everyone basically like has access to a partner. And so you're like showing off that you have access to sex right now. And like, that's not cool.
What?
Yeah, it was like an interesting way of him being horrified, but not in like a prudish Catholicism way, but in a like, hey,
We're not all doing that.
we don't all get to fuck today. So do that in private, which I thought was kind of funny.
So Shevek starts talking to some rich idiot that thinks he knows everything more about the theory of simultaneity than Shevek knows, even though that's not even published. And Shevek starts getting into this very negative mental state. He's talking in his internal monologue. He's like trying to shut his mouth, but he can't. And he starts to like really just kind of lose control. So there is a sexual assault in the next scene. So maybe skip ahead 5 minutes if you're not into listening to that.
That doesn't have a big overarching impact on the plot, so you're not missing anything by skipping ahead.
Yeah, take care of yourself, friends.
Vea takes an angry and out of control Shevek to a bedroom, so just to cool him off. She's joking around with him. They've had a very flirty relationship up until here. Now, to me, it was very innocent. It seemed like she was just, hanging out with him. And he starts to like lust after her. He starts to grab her by the waistband, and he wants to do it. And she says no. The guests are here. There's a apartment full of people. Her husband's out of town. She's married. She says no, and she's like, "If you want to do it, we can do it at another time." So you don't get. I didn't get the sense if she was interested or not, or if she was just trying to like get out of the situation, which I think are both valid.
To me, when I was reading this, I was like, oh, I completely understand like what she's doing. She's like, I'm going to try every tool I have in my toolkit because this is a tiny woman. In Uras, the women don't wear shirts, so she's already bare-chested. She's completely vulnerable. And this is like a big drunk dude. Like they talk about, Shevek as being a large man often. And so she kind of goes through the list of things that you do to prevent your own sexual assault when you can't do that physically. She makes excuses. She talks about her husband. She says, later, we'll do this later. Like she really, and it's so upsetting to read, just like her trying every tool that she has in her toolkit to make this stop. And he's not stopping. And his inner monologue is so indifferent to everything that she's saying. Nothing is even like making him pause. He's just continuing to assault this woman.
Yeah, that's right.
There's no point of reflection on what his actions are doing.
He continues, and he ends up ejaculating on her dress. And this is a part where like, you can see how society has twisted them in their roles. So obviously Shevek's just like completely twisted up by Eros. And then Vea is really worried about the dress and how it'll appear in the party and stuff like that. So you can see how the socialization of Vea is about like the wrapper, the dress. But I think Ursula chose to highlight that because wrapping paper and the veneer of Eros was something that she really heavily leaned into. And you can see it kind of reflected in this scene. I consider this like the moral darkest moment for Shevek because he's like completely overtaken by the possessiveness and the ownership. He has this expectation of Vea that shouldn't be there. He's drunk, right? He's completely polluted body and mind from this like one night out in the city. And this is like where he goes.
Yeah, it acts as a rock bottom for him.
The thing that I was bothered by with that is like, it should have been a better rock bottom, which is another way that Ursula's commenting on kind of men and gender dynamics, because it isn't a rock bottom for it. He thinks about it for like half a page. There's really very little guilt, meditation, atonement. We don't hear from Vea at all. He does not try to make amends. Like there is no apology. And it should be rock bottom, but it isn't. Like he doesn't really do anything with this, and it doesn't seem to I wish I underlined it in my book, because he was basically like, I didn't think of her again. Like, there's a moment where it's just like, nah, wash my hands of this shit. He's been so corrupted by Urus that, like, there isn't even that attempt at atonement, which pissed me off. And I was like, oh yeah, a lot of men just do this. And a lot of men who say, like, I'm not that kind of, I'm a good guy. And they've done this. They've done this dozens of times. They did this in university all the time, and they don't even think of it as assault. They don't think of themselves as rapists, and they could just continue very, like, unexamined lives.
It also never comes back to affect his marriage or his partnership in Anaris. Like, yeah, after this scene, it's done. That's why we mentioned at the beginning it's not a big plot point, because it just doesn't come back up, right?
Yeah.
It's a commentary on like the woman's perspective on this is not, I was almost assaulted. It's people are going to realize something happened because my dress changed.
Well, I think there's, for me at least, there's like kind of two pieces to it. One is, often when you've been assaulted, you focus on the thing that's easiest to focus on. You don't want to perceive yourself as a victim. And it honestly, in like this, the culture that she set up on Urus, women don't have that much power anyway. So Vea's probably had a ton of horrifying experiences with men, because the misogyny on this planet is rampant. And it's very normal to not process that right away and to process everything else.
Yeah, I think this acts as a rock bottom insofar as it's a catalyst for him, right? He sees that he's got to get what he needs to get done on this world. He needs to get that done so he can get out of here, right? Like, this is where he starts to take action to, like, get this theory finished and get it where it needs to be.
So after the party, he actually vomits at the party. He comes out, he retches. I think it's like symbolic, like he's so overtaken. Obaye is Vea's cis brother, and I think he uses her a little bit earlier on in the story to like try and coax Shevek to give him the theory of simultaneity. He's there, and on the way home, they start talking about how they need to keep Shevek isolated, and this is he's going out unhandled into society because he's the forerunner in a prophecy. So the rebellion in Ben Billy, which is another country, the uprising, the Adonians, and I think that's also happening in AIO as well. He's the forerunner in a prophecy. So Odoniism and Odo and Adoniism's alive and well on Uras, and they're kind of using him as like the moon man that came, and he's like, it's a signal that society's going to change, and here we go. So that people are using him as an excuse to uprise. So that's the end of that chapter. We head back in chapter 8 to the moon. So we're going to jump backwards in time. This is a pretty pivotal chapter as well. This chapter starts with him being denied publication of his work by Sebul. So if you remember, he actually co-published with Sebul. He just wanted credit. And then at some point, something happens. And I think this is where I have a theory about this, but Sebul starts to turn on him regardless. He's like, your principles of simultaneity isn't real because it has no function to the social organism, right? Anaris is anarchistic. So if they can't see something that's benefit to society, and that's a big revelation because there's not supposed to be walls on Anaris, right? Who gets to choose and who doesn't?
Reminiscent of like Soviet Russia. Have you ever read Vasily Grossman? I'm gonna name drop I read hard books. All right, Life and Fate is hard but fucking awesome. It's about Stalingrad during World War II, and there's like a billion characters. One of the character arcs is a sort of Nobel level physicist who comes up with a lot of the theory behind essentially like atomic physics, right? So stuff that makes atom bombs. But there's all this discussion about what does this mean for the party and what does this mean for the theory of socialism or communism? It can't be true because it doesn't comport with our political theories. And it's a very similar oh, that's science. Now eventually Stalin himself steps in and is like, my aims are to blow people up and this will help there. But yeah, it's that same vibe of the society does not care about the advance of science. They care about the advance of the society, and those are different goals.
Similar to Sea of Tranquility, where bureaucracies are,
yes,
they try to protect themselves.
The goal of a bureaucracy is to protect the bureaucracy. Yeah,
the survival instinct in the individual actually is part of the social organism. Also, it just scales up.
And in this case, I guess it's this closed off I think this idea that Anaris is totally closed off from outside influence is like a big piece of the vibe there, because they don't get to consider new things very often, and their internal sort of immune system is against any new thing.
And that's what Shevek is starting to realize, like, oh,
Yeah.
So a drought hits at the kind of the same time, and he's separated. I'm going to yada over a lot of it, but he's sent on a work order to like a drought stricken place. He gets stuck on a train, and on the train, they have to start making decisions on who gets fed and who doesn't. This is a case study in being like, we're anarchistic, everyone's equal. But then when food is scarce, they have to choose if they're able to feed a train full of stuck passengers or feed like a nearby town that's a mill. And you start to realize like there are inherent inequalities in some of these dynamics, regardless of what your political beliefs are. So he gets home from the drought. And this is like a funny moment, actually. He gets home from a drought. He finds Takfur, his wife, and Sabek, his daughter, are gone. They've been sent on another work order to like a remote peninsula to do like science lab work. And Shevek gets home and he's so upset. He tries to swear and he can't. It's really hard to swear when sex is not treated as dirty. So those are not swear words, the sex words.
So
and
good.
Blasphemy, because there's no religion, right? Blasphemy doesn't exist.
Shit. There's only one thing left, and it's poop.
That's right.
I don't know. How did I think of that so fast? That's alarming.
But they also don't like see poop as unclean. Like they talk
Ooh.
about like the shit house. Like they use the word shit
Yeah.
very like it's not a problem.
Well, everybody has to deal with it, right? So in this society where you have to do whatever kind of labor needs to be doing, everyone's done work where you've had to deal with
Shit
shit.
stool.
The shit stool. Yeah. Okay. If we just normalize the word shit, yeah, we're out of words.
This is when Shevek starts writing to Atro. Atro is like a war, jingoist war type person on Uras, the planet. But in science, they kind of bond and they have ideas and they riff and stuff like that. So this is kind of like the ambiguous utopia is tested by nature, but also the individual Shevek is tested by like the society around him. And he starts to break out. And then this is where you start to see the path of Shevek getting to Uras. That's the point of this chapter.
Yeah, and building a relationship with Atro as well, right? Like it talks about how Shevek has these ideas and he sends them out to Oros, and then he gets back like holes in what he's written and opinions against it. Like that's what really helps him grow and flourish, is the fact that he's being challenged by someone that thinks on the same level as him about the same things.
I love how Leguin talks about this, because when she's talking about the playwright, there's this bit where I'm like, what happens to the artist when they can't produce their art? Or what happens to the intellectual when they can't have their ideas challenged? And like, is that its own type of famine? Because like there's like a famine narrative weaved through this part of the story. And the playwright goes crazy. There's nowhere for the art to go. So the art eats him alive. And that's starting to like, it seems like the way she's written it, the stretches in between him hearing from the physicists on Uras, like the stretches of time feel like he's thirsty or he's hungry, like there's this lack. And then he gets this like little tiny bit of sustenance that keeps him going just long enough. She writes it so beautifully.
The way that she actually writes these chapters are like remarkable, because one of the philosophies she has is like, in order to do good work, you have to be moral. It has to be something that's convicted on morality to do good for the society. And you see that with a lot of science, right? Like people are just studying fish guts and they're just curious about RNA, and you don't know where the gems are, right? Like people are like, they're cutting funding to science and they're like, can we have more things like Ozempic? And you're like, well, actually, you don't get the Ozempic without the scientist that's obsessed with orangutans, because you don't know where the Ozempic gems are. So you send people out on their whims, and many people study things that don't really amount to something, or maybe it's base knowledge that's used in other research, but you can't really gut that, right? So you have to let the individual go. And then out of that, you potentially provide value.
I'll give you the best example I know of this, which is, there's like deep vents in the ocean that are very hot. Well, it's cool to study organisms that can survive in these crazy environments. They're called like exotherms. One of the things they found, so DNA typically would sort of unravel. It would scramble just like eggs in that kind of heat. Why doesn't it?
These are volcanic vents, so it's like it's so hot.
Yeah, it's so hot.
Yeah.
It would ruin. You could not be there. Well, they found an enzyme that keeps DNA from cooking, and we now use it to amplify the DNA signal to do DNA polymerase, which as like paternity tests and all the stuff that they do for like crime detection. All of that work requires magnifying DNA from like a sample that only works in the lab because we found a microorganism in a hot vent. Some nerd was like, I'd like to study that. And now we can tell whose baby that is. Where are we?
Let's get back into the plot just for legibility of, let's get through this, please. Shevek wakes up back at his dormitory after the party. He's hungover. He's horrified at himself. Briefly, doesn't really, as Sarah pointed out, reflect on his sexual assault that much. Night at the party kind of wakes him up, though. He realizes Trefoilist's warning was correct. He starts to do his work, but in the shadows. He teaches his class and stuff like that, but he doesn't really let them know that he's working. To them, it doesn't really look like he's doing much. He wipes his computer. He doesn't write things down. And then Paye talks to him, and I think they're kind of getting wise to like he's up to something, because Paye lies about, they're building their own. I think they called it the Ansible, which is something that comes up actually in Ursula Guin's other book, The Left Hand of Darkness. So Paye kind of lies to him, they're making their own, and there's no way that they have any sort of like, not even close. But Shevek realizes they're trying to own him. Right? They're trying to goad him into giving them the theories and stuff like that. He works diligently on his own. As he's working, he's kind of getting back to himself. I think, Sarah, this is the kind of theme you mentioned, where like the individual, he's into his art. He's connecting with his own mind again. He's not polluted. He gets far enough along and he asks A4, who's his manservant, can he escape his handlers and Neo Aseo? He wants to see the real society. He wants to see the downtrodden poor. And A4 does help him do this. He escapes his handlers. For the first time, Shevek's out in the city. This time he sees the real city. It has bars on the windows. There's I think a dead man in the gutter. A4 tells him to meet up with a grocer, some sort of grocer. That's where like the rebellion's happening or something. But Shevek doesn't know where he's going. So he's just kind of wandering the streets. He ends up giving like all of his money to a beggar. He like opens his wallet and just gives him like $1,000, and Shevek has no money because he doesn't understand money still. Someone's in need. He needs it. He ends up getting to a pawnbroker who takes him to something called the Joking Lane. Here he kind of meets the rebellion. There's not a lot of hope. They're doing it, but they're going to die, essentially. Their weapons aren't great, but there's going to be a protest. There's a workers' strike that's happening in a few days. They ask Shevek if he can attend. He agrees. They want to do the protest with him as a symbol. So he gives a speech, an impassioned speech on a podium. He tells the 100,000 workers that they are true Odonians because they have empty hands. That's a theme, right? He left with nothing.
And arrived with nothing.
And then the IAO military just attacks. The helicopters come in, the gunships come in, they just start firing on everyone. Shevek ends up dragging a hurt dude into a cellar. The police are going around the streets in roving patrols, trying to round people up and shoot them. So he ends up surviving, but the man in the cellar dies. And that's kind of how the chapter ends, is Shevek just like alone in this cellar with this dead dude. So he kind of he saw the real society, and he realizes obviously like it was a mistake coming to Uras. He did break through his science here, but then in other ways he was very naive. Right. He doesn't understand the society. He doesn't understand the like depths of depravity that's going on with all the walls and all the profit motives. He doesn't understand any of it. He noted at the beginning when he first landed that like he has all of these intellectuals around him who are free to do, good science, but he noted they're all rich. And now he's seeing like the other side. He's out free from them. And what happens immediately when he gets into like under society, he sees people getting crushed immediately. Right. So that's a big, big theme for him.
Yeah, and just how desperate and unsafe they are too, right? Like they talk about the moments before he goes and makes his speech. Now he has to be shifted around to all these different apartments and basements and things like that to do his writing because he's not safe anywhere, and the people that are protecting him aren't safe either, right? So it's a big theme of just like instability when you're down at that level of society.
Okay, quick pause before we keep chatting through this book. This episode is brought to you by Adobe Acrobat. And we love Adobe Acrobat because it actually helps us prep Pagenerd. Most of the time, reading isn't the hard part. It's everything around it. You've got PDFs, random notes, maybe a doc with quotes, a few tabs open. Tommy writes directly in his books. So we have all these show notes, but they're everywhere. It's chaos. Acrobat has this really cool feature called PDF Spaces, and it basically turns all of that into one organized, searchable knowledge hub. You can pull in PDFs, links, even other docs, and treat them like a shared workspace instead of a pile of files. But the interesting part is the AI layer on top of it. You can actually ask questions across everything in that space using a pre-built or personalized AI assistant, like, what are the main themes here, or where does this idea show up? And it'll give you answers with citations that link back to that exact spot in the document. You're not just guessing, you can actually trace it, and it's not a hallucination. That would have saved us so much time. If you're working with other people, you can all be in the same space, highlighting, commenting, building on each other's notes instead of sending 12 versions of the same doc back and forth. It's less, where did I put that? And more, oh, everything's here. If you want to try it, head to adobe.com/acrobat and check out PDF Spaces. Thank you for sponsoring creatives and readers, Adobe Acrobat.
Wow, look at that. We have an ad. Great. But I still want to give a shout out to a bookstore. So years ago, I went to New York City, and there's like a kind of quintessential bookstore called The Strand. If you go to New York, you have to go to this bookstore. It's pretty iconic, a couple floors. But I remember going in there and just buying a bunch of books, the staff being super, super helpful. Back then, I wasn't quite the reader I am now, and they really helped me get into some of the books. They found some books that I would be interested in. So if you're ever in New York City, I want to give a shout out to The Strand. It's a classic bookstore. So we're going to go back in time. This one's like back in time, but just before Shevek leaves. So we're starting to get the timelines converging. So we learned that it's been 4 years of famine. So that's 4 years of Shevek and Takfur being apart. Kind of an interesting chapter here where it's just like, I thought it was a strange scene. It's from the point of view of a truck driver. And this is where I started to realize, like, Ursula Le Guin's like head hopping. When you write a book, one of the main things that they tell you is like, don't head hop. Don't go from this person's head to this person's head without some sort of break. It confuses people. This did confuse me, but I thought it was kind of fun. The truck driver is basically just like opining on monogamy and just like marriage and how eventually you get old and you just want to be with somebody. So I thought that was maybe a sweet little take on that. It's not important, but I thought it was an interesting footnote from her perspective.
Well, it's just when, like you said, a point of like just having any kind of break or indication. Because again, as an audiobook consumer, I just like am listening to this and I'm like, I don't know if this is a different person. I don't know if this is Shevek in the future or the past. Like, no idea what is happening.
Yeah.
Here.
The whole thing is about time connecting over the past and the present, cause and effect, kind of having this through line. And that's kind of how Shevek's putting together this theory of everything simultaneity is like things happening at the same time, right? The word. That's the idea of like he's connecting the dots. So I think it's important to his development. Also, we realize like, so during this time, Takfur and Shevek are sending letters to each other. And we read one of Takfur's letters and then it's like, and it never arrived. But how would Shevek know that? So she's just dropping these hints. It's kind of an interesting chapter that she's like pulling back. It's kind of this omniscient point of view. The book's almost written like you're in Shevek's head, but I don't think you are. I actually think you're in this omniscient point of view the whole time.
You definitely bounce around and realize as you're reading that you've moved to somebody else's head or you've moved to the omniscient narrator.
She's so clean with her writing and so poetic with her writing that it works. Whereas like someone like me is writing something like that, clumsy as fuck.
It's like a high wire act. Like either it's going to be completely unreadable or it's perfection. There's no in between.
After that scene, we see Shevek on a transport truck. He's kind of curled up. He's pushing 40 at this point. This is like 20 years between when he started thinking about the theory, he got married, he meets back up with Takfur. They have a really nice reuniting scene where they go to the communal cafe and they're kind of just like a little bit strangers to each other, but then they reunite because they're like, Ursula makes a point to say like when he first meets Takfur, it's almost like love at second sight, actually, because he doesn't remember her from his childhood. You know, like Inception, they have like that token that you have to have to like know where you are in space and time. They're kind of like that for each other because she always challenges him because she doesn't see him as her husband necessarily. She is, but she sees him as like this person who has this theory that needs to be like published for the social good. And she helps him like navigate all that stuff.
Well, importantly, they have a different viewpoint on relationships than most other people on Anaras, right? Like they made an agreement to be with each other and to have that bond like we touched on earlier. And like most people on Anaras don't do that. And when you forge that bond, like you don't have to, there's no pressure to. So I see that as the anchor between them is like they've decided that they are going to have this bond between each other forever. And they didn't need to do that. They decided they were going to, and they act as an anchor point for one another.
Yeah, it's really nice. I really thought it was sweet. I thought she was such a great strength of character. So they reunite. The famine is kind of over. The economy is still kind of shit. This is where we learn Tyrion, who's the playwright that Sarah and I were talking about earlier. He's actually in an asylum. And he just writes the same play over and over and over again. He's like in a mental loop because his art has nowhere to go. And in this kind of like the background of all the stuff happening, Sabul won't publish their work. He won't give Shevek a teaching class. You know, Shevek's being shunned essentially. Takfur basically goes like, why don't you just create your own syndicate? Publish your own shit. What are they going to say? No? They say no, then they've outed themselves as being proprietarians. And it kind of works. They start to publish their work. And the theme here is like permanent revolution.
Yeah.
In order for the anarchist society to survive, they continually have to have a revolution of ideas and challenges.
Also extremely Soviet, by the way. We are continuing the revolution.
Yeah, that's the thing, is they're not like finding a new way to govern and sticking with it. It's like they've got to keep reinventing it. That is the society they've built.
Even though it becomes extremely Orwellian, like, we're going to call it the revolution, but it is very much, let's not change a goddamn thing.
But it's almost like, let's prevent it from changing. Like, because the publishing house was becoming, like, they were controlling ideas and they were consolidating power. So it's like, we need to like claw back our ideals from this like slow shift to power concentration that like humans will just do because that's what
we do.
It's by our nature.
And on this moon where there are no power structures, you still have to ask the question, okay, but what are the power structures?
And they're there.
They're there.
When resources are scarce, that's when you start seeing it butt up against anarchy. And so one of the resources that's in short supply this time is what can go back to Horus. And like that's what the control of publishing has, is there's only a limited amount of material that can go back. And Sabul has full control over what goes back to Horus. So like that's why they couldn't make this publishing thing in the first place, because none of those ideas would be able to get back to the main planet. So now that control is being lost, like that was the resource that is scarce, they're trying to claw away from. That's what was giving him power.
And Sabul's a slimy little bitch.
Sabul.
I know.
He is. He's such a slimy little bitch. I hate that character.
He sure is.
So annoying. His dorm, you're not supposed to have anything in his dorm. Badap and there's a funny moment like early on when Badap and Shevek are dating, and like Badap visits Shevek in his dorm and he has an orange blanket. And he's like, what's this? He's like, how dare you have a blanket? And he's like, orange has no place in the anarchist state. Like, they're just joking. But then Sabul's actual dorm is full of like stuff. He obviously doesn't mind just like taking things and putting them in his room and stuff.
And it's like an office built for two, and he fills it up so that another person could never feasibly work there. As much as like anyone could come and work there, like they can't actually because it's full of shit.
Petty and slimy and not a good academic. He just needs to steal other people's shit because he has no good ideas. He sucks.
Yep. It's like you don't even want to be a middle manager.
I started my own company because I couldn't handle people.
Back to your point at the beginning, Andrew. This is a woman who was worried about her ability to get published. This is a society where the publishing houses maybe have too much power and it has strayed from the ideals of the publishing house.
Could you imagine? Could you imagine a world like that?
Weird. Yeah.
I can't even imagine someone as goddamn talented as Ursula Guin being like, there's no way she wasn't going to get published. She's so too talented.
Yeah, who reads that and is like, no thanks.
Yeah, and then later writes about how you can't just publish everyone on the internet because it's like they're not good at writing and it'll like, like she saw through it so clearly on both sides. Yeah.
Oh, I love her.
Her point is like people on the internet are careless with language, and that's true, right? That's very true. You're 140 characters, right? There's a stillness to some of the art that she has in a good way.
That's a great
it's like
word.
Takes its time, and I think that's like a thing that's like a lot of stuff comes out of being still and being bored, people being curious and just giving time to follow the vents down to the ocean. I know myself when I was younger, dude, I really did think of education as like, get educated, get a job. And that's not insignificant, right? There's a lot of people out there that are struggling, and this is a capitalist society. You need money.
Oh, the easiest way to say you don't need to have a job is to have a lot of money that you got at your job.
Yeah, it's not, and I'm very happy with my career.
You should be. You're not a middle manager.
Looking back at my career, I kind of shun math. I like design, like it's kind of fun, but I shun math, and I really like biotech these days. All the stuff going with RNA, and there's something called Tiger now, TIGR. There's like CRISPR, but it's like the next version of it. Like, so like if I could tell my younger self, like, if you're curious about that stuff, then go for it, right? The letters you could write to your younger self, right?
I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a business owner. All my life is just risk, but I come from like two parents who worked for the government and wanted me to have a pension and didn't make very much money. And so every time I do take a risk, I just have to be very anxious about it for months instead of just not doing it. But I'm like, I'm just going to take the risk, and then my therapist is going to have to fucking hear about it for a while.
We're definitely in the therapy session, but I feel that I don't take risks actually for almost the opposite reason. All I hear about like at home family time is like successes. And, you know, a string of, like, to use a baseball analogy, like a string of singles, a string of like this worked, then that worked, then that worked, is almost better than, well, I took a big swing and it didn't work out. And, you know, it keeps me from taking big swings when I'm looking at, you know, go start a company and it's like, this is an obvious thing to do. Why am I nervous? But anyway, Ursula Le Guin, you're pulling the best out of us.
Back in Plotland, Bedap is here as well. So Bedap has been a revolutionary since the beginning. He kind of inspired Shevek a little bit when they were getting into a relationship before he met Takvur. So Shevek, Takvur, and Bedap start the Syndicate of Initiative, which is publishing Shevek's work and theories. They also set up a radio to talk to other planets so that they start to talk to Uras. This is seen as treason. So you start to realize that similar to the divide that you have now, some people feel like them talking to Uras is actually treason. They should be killed or they should be beaten up or whatever. And some people don't. So the society, even in the anarchist state, is split on this dogmatic Odonian approach and this kind of freedom of information, revolutionary approach. And then that's how the chapter ends, is that they start to publish Shevek's work. We jump back to Uras after the revolution. Shevek has survived. He has made his way to the Terran embassy. So in this universe, there's a planet Earth, and they call themselves Terran. And there's an Terran embassy on Uras. He met Kang, somebody named Kang, at the beginning of the story. He was one of the handlers, one of the proprietarians that he met. So Shevek's at the embassy, which is functionally Terran soil, so IAO can't do shit. Terrans are proprietarians. They want his theories as much as anyone else, but he shares with them that IAO basically wants the theories to like dominate the other people, right? Like including the Terrans and the Hainish. They want to be able, imagine you're running military maneuvers in space and you don't have relativity to worry about. You can communicate instantly what's going on from point A to point B. You don't have to wait. So you have a very big leg up on logistics in space, essentially. That's what the IAO nation wants. That's what Uras wants. They call them Setians. Everyone in this, like in the Tau Ceti galaxy, they call them Setians, but that's what they want. So Terrans agree that they will let Shevek finish his theory of simultaneity under the agreement that they're going to broadcast it to every society. So Shevek's giving it to everyone, so they can't use it against each other. So he uses it to create what they call the Ansible. Up until this point, we don't know exactly what his theory does. It actually allows you to communicate regardless of the vastness of space instantly. That's what they are creating here. And thematically, obviously, it makes sense because Shevek wants to like broadcast ideas, right? He wants the sharing of ideas and the openness of the individual to interpret those ideas.
Should we talk about the fact that that's almost real?
What?
No, it's not. It can't exist, Tommy.
What? Entanglement, man, come on.
As much as that is the same information, like traveling at the speed of light, essentially, is you can't use it in any useful way to communicate.
And here's, all right, 30 seconds on what's going on. Okay.
Fight.
Okay, entanglement. Let's start with entanglement. Entanglement is this idea that if you have two particles, if they're quote unquote entangled, then measuring one of them constrains the other. So remember we talked about this idea that there's some things that you it can be in all states until you observe it. So we're going to talk about a word that does not matter. It's called spin. Spin is made up. It's just a word we use for something that has no really good term. But particles can have spin up or spin down. That's all you need to know. Now, let's say we have two particles that are entangled, and I go and measure one of those. So in other words, I like constrain it by measuring what is it right now, and I say it's up. If that happens, the other particle will be observed as down no matter what. So the fact that I observed something means you observed something, guaranteed. So this is a way to have a shared state, if you will. And the cool thing about this is those two particles can be anywhere in the universe. So if you're on Tau Ceti and I'm on Earth and I observe one of the entangled particles, your state is constrained to mine. And we have this piece of information that is the same. Now, two problems with this. One, how did the particle get there? The particle itself obeys the speed of light. So you can't like send a particle faster than the speed of light somewhere else. That's problem one. Problem two, that's not enough information to actually communicate. I observed up, guaranteed you observed down. Does that mean anything? No. So all you actually get from this is what we would call shared randomness. Think of it as if I roll a die on Earth and you roll a die on Tau Ceti, all we're guaranteed is we'll both get the same answer on that dice, but it's random. Is that useful? Slightly, because computers use randomness to do things like security. If you could have a bunch of computers that are guaranteed to have the same random state, that would be somewhat useful. But it's a thin thing. And also, again, how does the particle get over there?
This is a big moment for Shevek, because at the end of this chapter, so he's made this bargain with the Terrans. He actually realizes that his journey as an individual is very important to the development of this principle. If he stayed on an RS, he would not have been able to have the ownership to pursue the theory. If he didn't start on an RS, he wouldn't have had the social pressure and the cause and effect and the factors that went into his thinking wouldn't have been there as well. So it was important that he leave an RS, but it was also important that he started on an RS. Most of the protagonists in her books start somewhere, they leave on the journey, and they come back. It's like a closed circle. But I thought that was an interesting commentary. I read it as like extremism of a state can diminish the potential of an individual. People have to be able to navigate their creativity and their intellect absent as many walls as possible, or just the right amount of walls in order to like flourish. That's kind of how I read that. I don't know how you guys were feeling about it when you got to this point.
I didn't read
it. No, I think it's a critical piece of information here about how you form ideas over time and based on different environmental inputs, right? So like you said, if he was just stuck on an Aris, the theory would have never been developed. But also if it would have stayed on the capitalism world, it would have just gone as leverage to the like he has to go through all these different states, get all these different perspectives, and go through all these different experiences in order to get to where he ends up, which is this theory that can be used by everyone all at once. And I think it's just an important theme that I would see here of like starting somewhere, going on a journey, and learning and growing throughout that journey. And if you don't do those things, like one of which is going on a journey and actually traveling around and seeing different perspectives, but also if you don't grow from that, right? Like if you don't let other opinions change your mind about things and influence you and make you do different things in your life, then what was the point of going on the journey in the first place?
Absolutely. And that's one of another theme is like, the shadow, almost like the Jungian sense, right? Like like you have a capacity in you to do good, but you also have a capacity in you to do bad. And you need to be in touch with both of those things. And if you look at somebody who's like doing evil under the guise of good, oftentimes they have an undeveloped sense of shadow, because you think egotistically everything that you do must therefore be on the side of good. You're not looking at the effects of what you're producing. You're actually like, well, I'm doing it for a good reason. But if you are in touch with your shadow, you're like, I actually can do wrong. And that's like an important development of like a balanced human being, is to identify that in yourself and call it out.
And that's what we didn't get in Frankenstein. So Frankenstein is a very similar journey of a scientist who has kind of a focus of something that he wants to create and bring into the world, but absolutely no influence from a place like Anaras, or the ability to see things outside of himself as though they matter. So it's two very opposite journeys. One that is like extremely destructive and careless, and then the other which could have ended up there too, but didn't, because of this specific journey in the worldview of starting in the anarchist place, leaving and coming back.
Yeah, he also has people that he trusts, right? So like it's important, if you can't see your own shadow and engage with it, you have someone that you trust the opinion of that can see your shadow and tell you about it, right? So it's a matter of having trusted advisors and people that you actually have a strong partner relationship with, where you can trust their input based on what you're doing and what they're seeing, and you can let that influence how you're living your life. It's not always about self-examination. Sometimes it's about other people examining you and taking that information at face value and not just saying, well, that's their opinion.
Yeah, the social organism. We live in the social organism. We are individuals in the social organism, but all of our psyche, all of our negative emotions does scale. And when our negative emotions scale, you get bad things that happen in society, right? You get Nazis and stuff like that. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that they had like a runaway disgust mechanism, where like everything that they didn't like that was other was disgusting to them. So on Anares, it's 5 years time jump. So after Takvar and Badap and Shevek made the Syndicate of Initiative, they're not taking any work orders. So they're a bunch of Nushnibis. That's what they call people who don't take their work orders. They're just publishing stuff. This is when Shevek, because he's publishing his theories now freely, he actually wins the Aoen Prize. I can't really say it. It's basically like, the Nobel Prize in physics or whatever. Sabul didn't win. Eat it, Sabul.
Take that, Sabul.
Suck it, you slimy bastard. And then this is when there's an interesting scene where they're in the PDC. But App is basically arguing he's arguing they should be allowed to go to Uras. And it's actually Rulag who's on the council.
Mommy issues.
And I think this is where you start to realize, actually, we were blaming Sabul, which is true. But I think like we talked about Shevek and Takvar being split up. We talked about the publication being shut down. And I think it's not a coincidence that Rulag is on the council. I think Rulag was kind of pulling the strings the whole time, because Rulag is a very, very hardcore Ordonian, to the point where like she basically abandoned Shevek to Polat, who is his dad, to be raised. So, no ownership over the kid. Kind of left him. She forgot who he was when she was taking care of him in the nursery, came back and said hello. And then also, because she doesn't believe in ownership, I don't think she liked the idea of Takvar and Shevek being a couple. So you can see like even their PDC initiatives up to this point has been to split them up. So I think that you can see like the mother and the son having these conflicting ideals, and Shevek essentially has to like run away and break out from this shadow, essentially.
Straight up mother-in-law shit. Like straight up boy mom nonsense right here. I know, like, yes, she definitely has these like hard and fast Adonian beliefs, but also he rejects her. Like when he's in the hospital and she goes to visit him, and she kind of is like, hey, like we could work together. Like there could be a relationship here. And he's basically like, fuck you, you abandoned me. Like he has full parental abandonment issues. And she's just like, okay, fuck you then. And then like is in the shadows making his life harder.
I'll make your professional life hell.
Like the worst possible version of a mother figure. But I do think it stems from that rejection. Like she abandons him because of her Odonian ideals or whatever, but then she has still some of that instinct of I want a relationship with my kid. And he's like, no, fuck you, mom. And then, yeah, she's just pulling strings in the background.
I didn't catch it the first time I read it. Actually, it's the second one. I'm like, oh yeah, Rulag's kind of fucking him up. So anyway, back to Takvar, the wife being his rock, essentially. She's like, you have to leave, Shevek. And he's like, what are you talking about? Because like, there's a contract that says the Urasti can't come step foot on Anares. That's part of the contract. Doesn't say that the Anares can't go to Aras. So Shevek, at Takvar's behest, basically is like, you need to leave to do your work. And there's potential violence. At this point, they have a second child. It's a son named Pilam, I believe. And Takvar's just like, you need to get out of here. I'm not owning you, but you need to get out of here to go do your work. And that's exactly. So the first chapter, we had Shevek. It was unnamed at the time. He walks through the like disheveled mob that's angry about him leaving. That's why they're angry, because he's going to Uras to share the ideas. They see it as treason. So now we have perfect circle. So the last chapter is Shevek has published his work. And as part of the bargain, he's able to get on a Terran ship, and they're going to drop him off at Anares. And then on the ship there, he meets someone who's a heinous traveler from that faraway system named Kesho, who's like in awe of him in a society having like this non-hierarchical state. Shevek realizes his voyage. In order to complete his voyage, he needs to go home and kind of bring basically himself as a transformed human back. But Anares see him as an Urasti now, because he went to Uras. So you're no longer of Anares, you're polluted. But it ends with like the spaceship landing and Shevek going off to reunite. And that's it. That's the Dispossessed. I asked you guys at the beginning, I'm like, is sports a cooperation or is it a competition? That's one of the questions I asked in part one. I'm just interested in your guys' take, because I think it really, the circles of sociability is like the dynamic in sports actually highlights that quite effectively.
I've not changed. I think it's cooperative. I think it's cooperative even more, maybe more. But at first I was thinking about like amateur athlete, like running and stuff that nobody gets paid to do. But like pro sports, dude, it's entertainment. And I kind of wonder how much, not like overt collusion there is, but understanding that, like, you know, for instance, if one team is really good all the time, it gets boring for everybody else and the pie shrinks.
But if you think about like the Olympics and even when different countries were communist, they still wanted to prove that they were better than the capitalists. Like there's always a sense.
The Olympics was the same dick measuring contest as going to the moon.
Yeah.
But like sponsored by Visa.
Yeah.
Visa, if you're out there, we would love to have your money.
Yeah, sponsor
We're better.
us.
We're not a dick measuring contest at all.
No, I don't have one.
Anyway, where were we?
Okay, let's take it home. Sports is a good metaphor because it's a competition on the field, right? Like you're playing, you're trying to crush your enemy, but it's also a cooperative competition because you've agreed to the rules and what those rules mean and what it means to go over those rules. And without those rules, it's just like you can't play the sport.
It would be boring to watch or participate.
But within those, you also have an economic competition to like have your sports team be the best.
Or your league be the best even.
But then like Tommy said, like if one team starts winning too much, actually that's a problem because cooperatively you actually want to like make money, right? So you can see like society isn't just one thing. A complex thing like sports culturally is not just one thing. It's actually it's like a tree. You cut it in half, you have the concentric rings. Society kind of works like that. And what Ursula Le Guin's done, I'm going to put sports away because it's such a weird analogy for this book, but she's done the same thing with like to showcase that you can have capitalist society, you can have socialist society, you can have anarchist thoughts, but you actually, you know, these things inform on each other, right? The individual informs on society and vice versa. It's in the interplay of these things that you get someone like Shevek and some of these great ideas.
In conclusion, this book was awesome. I'm looking forward to reading it.
Yeah, highly recommend reading this one.
Pagenerd is Andrew Corway, Tommy Guy, Sarah Stockdale, and me, Rick Buick. The producer is Jay Coburn. Next time, we're reading Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. And you can check out everything we're reading for upcoming episodes at pagenerd.com. Happy reading!
You're an artisan, Dick Factory.